Barker.
Go back.
Anderson. Oh, down the next side.
He's got it. He's got it.
New Zealand got it. New Zealand have won a historic test match.
Oh, my God.
As Jimmy Anderson gets strangled down the leg side. Wagner gets it. And
He's done it.
For the fourth time in history, a team that has been forced to follow on has turned around and won the match, and New Zealand win.
Live from the Export Beer Garden studios, you're listening to the BYC, and if you're anything like me, you awoke this morning still basking in the glory of New Zealand's stunning victory against England in the second test at the magnificent Basin Reserve. While in recent times, the cricketing world has become increasingly obsessed with the whiz-bang of T20, yesterday we were reminded of just why Test cricket remains the pinnacle of the game we love. 5 days of drama, culminating in a pulsating final session, with the nation perched on the edge of their seats, praying for a victory that seemed impossible just days before. And what a triumph it was, by a single solitary run and an enormous tribute to the Black Caps' refusal to give up. I, for one, never doubted the boys for a moment, but my BYC colleagues Ford and Cleaver will no doubt have to eat some humble pie after their comments on the Black Caps' chances in last week's podcast. Dylan Cleaver, how good?
Yeah, that was terrific, wasn't it? I was lucky enough to be at the Basin for every day but that one.
V-Day.
But that one, yeah. It was an amazing game. Although, to be honest, after 2 days, I thought they were cooked. I did not see a path back for them, and not just for the state of the game or where the game was at that point. They just didn't look at the races. I think they were 138 for 7, chasing England's 435 for 8. Root and Brooke had smashed them around the park. They batted really poorly. Their body language looks defeated. I didn't see a path back after 2 days, and then we just saw 3 pulsating days of cricket.
Absolutely. And, you know, I got to be honest, I'm with you, Dylan, in that first 2 days, and Paul Ford. I was concerned, actually, that we were heading for an even more humiliating defeat than the first test match, but somehow the boys pulled it back, and always a little spark in the back of my brain was that maybe England would get a bit, baseball crazy and just open the door a little bit for us. But I'll be honest, Paul Ford, I never anticipated this magnificent victory.
Yeah, look, it was unbelievable. I was actually quite emotional. I went along to the game, not for every single ball, but for every day. And there's humble pie. Yes, I think that's fair. And Dylan and I also consumed a number of APAs as well, and that's probably a good replacement for humble pie. But yeah, this was an incredible match, just a jaw-dropping, electric, unforgettable, heartbreaking, pulse racing match, and the win was nice. And don't get me wrong, I love the fact that we won. I love that it was one run and all the statistical nerdery that comes with that, and just the sheer joy that erupted around the Basin when that wicket was taken. But I guess at the heart of it, it really made me realise just how much I just love the game. The intricacies, the weirdness, the tactics, the game management, the chaos, unpredictability, the grind. Matches like this, I think this is what gets cricket into your bones, and it really is the ultimate. And in the wash-up, this was a marauding England team, and it just felt like New Zealand were clinging on by their fingertips to this match, just hanging in there, just doing enough to stay with England. And it was quite incredible that they turned it around and I guess extended that unbeaten record at home to 11 series. And it was weird. I never really felt like New Zealand was going to win until they won. Like, I was never really confident at all during that match until they pulled it off. And maybe that's a bit of PTSD from watching too much New Zealand cricket over the years. But it was absolutely phenomenal, incredible. I'll never forget it.
It was interesting too, wasn't it, in terms of reading that English side, Dylan. They were cock-a-hoop. They were full of confidence. And I got the impression that they were totally relaxed in confident form, and there was never any question in their mind that they were going to lose that test match. And I think Paul makes a really fair point. New Zealand were just clinging on by the fingernails. And, you know, I was actually doing the radio show when we won that test match, and I happened to be on air when we actually won it. And the raw emotion, mate, that comes out when you win a test match like that, there's nothing like it.
Yeah, and look, I took us back to the end of day 2 when New Zealand were in a grim position. But from that moment on, and this is why cricket is just the greatest game ever invented, from that moment on, there were a series of kind of inexplicable events that all rolled into each other that produced just that jaw-dropping climax. And it starts with Tim Southey reaching back to his debut and depositing England over the fence for 6 times, climbing that, again, inexplicably climbing that Test 6 hitting record list. So he's one of the top now. Then it multiplied by Ben Stokes doing a very unbasball thing and enforcing the follow-on, which I'm really surprised about when you've got a 40-year-old opening bowler, a 36-year-old opening bowler, and your third seamer is a guy that recently was dropped because he wasn't fit enough to play 5-day tests. So I was surprised by that.
And your fourth seamer's got a bung knee. Your fourth seamer's got a bung knee, yeah, and the basin has never really turned. So, although it did in this test, so I was surprised by that. And then the top 3, which had a miserable series collectively, seemingly just drawing on the depths of whatever batting nous they have. And I thought Latham was excellent. I thought Conway did really well considering he didn't look in great nick. He was a mixture of grit and glamour. And I thought Kane Williamson, that's just the art of batsmanship there.
Yeah, so good to see.
That was just pure batting mastery.
Yeah, and just on the declaration, because I too thought that was a strange move by England. Yeah, sorry, the follow-on. Yes, the follow-on is what I mean. And I think that's what I was sort of alluding to when I was saying maybe England will think that they can just wrap this up, and it may just open the door for New Zealand, just the slightest crack, considering too, Paul Ford. When you consider the batting on the basin reserve, days 3 and 4 tend to be the good batting days, and New Zealand took full advantage, and in many ways England let them off the hook there.
Yeah, look, I mean, you mentioned the declaration as well, which was also a bit strange, 408 down. Why didn't England keep going? Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yes.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. But, in Ben Stokes' defence, God forbid, I kind of get why he did it too, because every indication was New Zealand would keel over, and Anderson and Broad and Robinson would take the top off that top order, and the damage would have been done, and they would have had a day off and been able to get home to their families a day earlier and all those sorts of things. So, and it was cloudy. They just, rattled through the New Zealanders and world-class bowling attack. That hadn't exactly bowled sort of 25 overs each. I don't think they were that tired. But the thing is, Latham, Conway and Williamson, as you say, Dylan, a batting masterclass, 7 hours for 130, and just in his own little world the whole time. I mean, New Zealand just turned it on, and I think, so, I get, and Dylan, I was sitting with you, we're like, why the hell are they enforcing the follow-on? It makes no sense to you. And, I just think that there was a way for England to win. Of course, you go through how it might have gone otherwise. England go out, pile up 500, and New Zealand have to chase 650 over the last 5 sessions or something. I mean, chances are that was never going to happen. But far out. I guess this is the thing about baseball: you live by the sword and you die by the sword. And to England, to be fair to England, they weren't even gutted about it at the end. They were like, man, what a hell of a game of cricket. I mean, there's something magical that's gone on there at the basin this week.
I will take one small exception to England not being gutted. Jimmy Anderson at the end of that match just going off his head at the umpires. And I was talking to Dylan before the podcast about the ball before the wicket ball, which in any situation probably would have been called a wide. And I was saying to my mates out in the Hoytey studios out there, for an umpire, that is the worst case scenario where the match and indeed the series hangs in the balance. The last thing you want as an umpire is to have a call that could affect the outcome like that. And it was a shocking delivery down the leg side from Wagner. It should have been wided, but let's forget about that. It wasn't, and the game went on. But let's look at the key.
We could talk about boundary countbacks and deflections for 4 or 5.
Exactly. So let's take it. We'll take it. But let's look at the key moments, because, I mean, the Basin Reserve wicket is always green on day one. But, geez, that was next level green on day one for this test match. We had them under the cosh, 3 for 21, and then the extraordinary Harry Brook, who is just something to behold, came out and smashed the shit out of us, as he's been doing for a lot of bowling attacks. And we've made someone's made a little note in the notes here, and I can concur how painful it was watching Daryl Mitchell, who we were saying should get a bit more of a run on our podcast, to fulfill that all-rounder role and get the balance right for the side. It was disdainful. Yeah. And it was like a lamb to the slaughter. Little medium pacers just being pasted over the boundary. Key moments for you, Dylan Cleaver.
There's actually a little backstory to that as well. And I know someone who's got access to the sound effects mics, and said that Daryl Mitchell was running up and bowling to Harry Brook and go, "Come on, superstar, hit me back over my head. Come on, superstar." And a couple of balls later, boom.
Yeah, well, we mentioned that in the commentary, actually. It was like, at one stage, Mitchell was mouthing off at Brook, having a bit of a go at him. And I was saying, well, good on you, why not? And then smashed him to smithereens.
Yes, and evidently his skipper from mid-off said something like, "Hey, Dazza, how about you shut the hell up and bowl?"
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned some of those inexplicable key moments before, but they didn't stop there as well. We had the Bracewell run out,
yes,
which was painful to watch, and that New Zealand tail meekly, what seemed at the time, wasting all the good work from the top order. Then you had England's top order being very skittish, then Stokes and Root come together, and then the final inexplicable act of that series is Wagner ball beating Bazball when it had been totally neutered previously at Mount Maunganui. There were just all kinds of little mini dramas going on that combined to just create this historical epic.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Wagner there, because we gave him a fair amount of stick on the podcast. He didn't, and indeed while we were doing the commentary, to be fair, that he just seemed to be lacking something. But that was a scenario, Paul Ford, tailor-made for Waggers, getting fired up, getting back to his old self a little bit and just hoeing in. Yeah,
I guess this is the thing. It hasn't been that long since we've seen it, but it did feel like there was a resurrection of sorts that happened there, where he just bowled multiple lion-hearted spells, Matt Henry too, and got those precious breakthroughs, that wicket of Stokes for 33 and Joe Root for 94, and you're just thinking those guys are playing terrible shots because they just really want to smash Neil Wagner to all parts, because that's what they've been doing since they've got to New Zealand. I think it was he was absolutely phenomenal. In terms of other bits and pieces that kind of stuck out to me, we could actually talk about this for hours.
Yes, we could.
You mentioned the green pitch, and I thought it was interesting that Ben Stokes at the end of that match said that it was the best pitch he has played on in cricket for years and years and years, and that is a massive credit to the team down there at the Basin. There was just a little bit in it for the whole 5 days. We mentioned Kane before. Extraordinary. I think Tom Blundell was absolutely superb with the bat.
Yeah, how good has he been? How good has he been, man?
And organising the limousine and cigars and champagne last night too, I'm sure. With the bat, he's now averaging 68 versus England. Daryl Mitchell's averaging 74. In terms of, and then that thing that Dylan mentioned, at New Zealand at 103 for 7, we were dead and buried in that first innings. It was an incredibly important innings from Tim Southee. In terms of the stuff that made me cringe, the Bracewell run out. It broke my heart that Tom Blundell was marooned on 90 in that, when we lost 5 for 28 and then 4 for 5 in that second innings. I think he really deserved 100. The Harry Brook run out, care of Joe Root, that was an amazing moment. And England, I've got to say, as I said before, when England were 80 for 5 and then built, you had Roots and Stoke had rebuilt them to 201 for 5, something like that, an hour and a half, 2 hours later. I thought, we're stuffed here. I've seen this movie so many times, and
recently too.
It had a different ending.
It did have a different ending, and just on Blundell, I think I mentioned in the last podcast that I think in his last 12 or 14 test innings, he averages 80-odd.
Yeah.
So he's really found his zone in terms of test cricket. He's a very solid campaigner. After having...
I think he's better than solid.
Yeah, that's fair. After having a sort of a sketchy start in Test cricket, well, he did get 100 against Australia. Let's not forget that. But just a classic kind of New Zealand performance in key moments. People producing like your Southey coming out and batting. And we've said this so often about Southey, about his batting. We need more, and he should do better because he's better than that, and he showed it.
Well, maybe he is just a six-hitter. Maybe that's all he should do. I think he scored 25% of his test runs via the long ball. So perhaps he should abandon any pretense to be a batter and just be the pinch-hitting six-hitter. Another interesting thing...
The Nighthawk.
He is the Nighthawk. Another interesting thing is, do you know who the top wicket taker for the series was?
Waiting!
I can help you. Neil Wagner. 11 wickets. He came from nowhere to take 11 wickets. He also had the best strike rate, which in terms of taking a wicket every slightly less or slightly more than 6 overs, I can't remember which it was. His average wasn't great, and his economy rate was appalling. But somehow,
not his job, right?
After all the mocking we gave him last week, and deservedly so, he ends up being the top wicket-taking bowler for the series.
Yeah, and he sort of strikes me as a sort of character, actually, Paul Ford, that if he does get a bit of criticism, it probably just fires him up a little bit more. And full credit to him, actually.
Full credit to us, then.
And full credit to us. I mean, I think the BYC are responsible for this victory. Let's not forget, in terms of great form, the man, Kane Williamson, of course, test run scoring record, Paul Ford. He's our best.
Yeah. Look, amazing. And, I know Dylan would have gone deep on this, but I guess just the actual moment itself was quite extraordinary, where it was basically just a run through sort of an East Coast wave chirp to, was it Tom Blundell who was at the other end? And then at the press conference, how did you feel, surpassing that record? And he literally started with that great New Zealand phrase, it's a privilege to be out there. It's just like as low key as you could get. And I guess that's kind of why we love him, right? He just wants to get on and do the job. And I actually genuinely think he was really very much in his own little world. And he realised at that moment when he went past that record that his job wasn't done. And he was so transfixed on doing the job for the team that personal milestones out the window. We'll talk about that at press conferences and in media interviews after the game. Let's just see how far we can take this.
Yeah, well, he was quite literally the rock of that innings, wasn't he? Because he wasn't going at a rapid rate of knots. He was just digging in and making sure that one end was going to be solid all the way through. So a massive tribute to him.
He knew that for New Zealand to have a chance to get back into that test, he had to bat for a day. And so he went out and batted for a day and a bit. It was just, I thought it was remarkable. And it's, I know he's an understated person, but it was also an understated innings. I think he might have hit 12 fours in his innings. It was not a sparkling innings by any stretch, but at the same time, it just felt so comforting to be there and watch him. You knew he was going to do his job.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you guys this question. Being keen Test cricket buffs that you both are, our greatest victory ever, Dylan Cleaver?
Certainly our most dramatic victory. And the victory.
Well, you can't get more dramatic than one run.
And the one I've possibly enjoyed the most. I think we've had more comprehensive victories where we've just been brilliant.
Yes.
So, depending on what metric, but I'm going to say I like that one. That will stick with me for a long, long time.
Paul Ford?
Yeah, look, it was for me, and I I don't want to Skype that I was at the game, but there's something about the raw emotion and the tension just sitting there amongst literally thousands of English fans and a whole bunch of kids from Wellington College had boosted their way there straight after school. I think it just felt like a win kind of out of nowhere, and it was just so gritty against an England team who are going on a massive tear and playing cricket in an extraordinary way. It just felt like we just didn't have a chance, and we just somehow found a way. And it was amazing. So look, for me, the one that sticks in my head, the Hobart win, the Doug Bracewell game. I mean, I wasn't there for that, but I would imagine that would have had a pretty good feeling to it. But
what about Southampton?
This one stands alone for me.
I remember how great I felt after Southampton to win the World Test Championship victory.
Yes. So, for me, this is our greatest, and purely on the basis of tenacity.
Yeah.
And the fact that we were never going to win that test match. Backbone, mate. Yeah. And the guys, to their absolute credit, just did not lie down and just kept throwing punches. Now, we've got a quote here from Marnus Labuschagne, which he sent through for us, Paul. But good on him. And he says, no better game in the world than Test cricket. What a finish, New Zealand versus England. True that, man. True that. And I mean, while we tinker around with cricket and trying to make it more appealing to the masses with the T20s and all that sort of stuff, you just can't beat a Test match, Dylan Cleaver.
Nah, and it happened in the day.
Yes. Without any sort of highfalutin pink balls
or a red ball.
I think there's another interesting thing too about, I guess, these two teams in particular. They play nicely together, like maybe there's a yin and a yang to the styles like we've talked about, but you can't help feeling that the two teams have got a massive amount of respect for each other.
Yes.
And there's obviously the Stokes factor and the McCullum factor and the Jeets factor and the Anton Devcic factor to a lesser extent. But, last night after the game, that they got in that dressing room and would have had a bloody ripper of a night together. Both teams.
Yes.
They would have had heaps of beers. I saw footage of them out playing keep-ups out in the middle of the basin and kind of doing all of the sort of, the humiliation to the guy that's stuffed up. And both teams were doing that jointly. And I just think there's something pretty cool about how, I don't know what the word is, how much, I guess, the way New Zealand plays cricket is now influencing the way a superpower like England is playing the game. And I think that there's a massive amount of mutual respect. And I just think that added to the magic.
Yeah, very much so. And actually, I was thinking about Stokes after that match wandering around in the field. He didn't look like a man greatly distressed. And I honestly believe, and fair cop to the English side, that they have so bought into that philosophy of baseball that were they to lose, so be it. And that was the kind of vibe that I got from them. It was like, hey, fair cop to you guys. You took the match, apart from Anderson having a bit of a spaz at the end of it there. They were, and I heard a rumour, and I don't know if this is true, Dylan. You always have the inside word on the goss here, that when Baz was captain of our side, that he actually wanted Southey as his vice.
Yeah.
Is that true? So in a way, kind of nice that he's now the coach of England and Tim Southey, captain of New Zealand, wins the match.
Yeah, and when I criticised Ben Stokes' decision to enforce the follow-on, that's pure cricket nerdery coming out in me there.
Yes.
And if they had batted again, they would have taken the New Zealand victory out of the equation, but they would have made it quite a lot, I guess, more likely for a draw, that New Zealand would bet out for a draw, and they're not interested in draws.
No.
So hats off to them for that. I still think it was a mistake, but, hats off to the fact that they just go and play every day with the one thought in their mind is that we're going to win this cricket match.
So next up, Sri Lanka. And, I whilst we're celebrating this victory, as we should.
It's going to get tricky now, isn't it?
There were deficiencies in our game. And we are, let's be honest, we are struggling in some areas. Do you foresee, Paul Ford, any significant changes for the Black Cap side to face the Sri Lankans, given the fact that the selectors are very solid in what they like. They stick with the tried and true, if you like.
Are you calling the selectors a bit wimpy, Jace? Because I think
Not wimpy, just
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Dour.
Conservative. Yeah. Look, I guess there's kind of two things here. There's what will the selectors do and what could they do. Now, I think, as you say, I don't think the selectors will do anything. I think they'll just play the same team and say, well, they won that game and, on we go. But I do think that Nichols is still under pressure. I think Will Young is under pressure. And I think Michael Bracewell is under pressure. Now, I haven't got all the sort of magical answers on that one, but, I guess who would you bring in? If you want to have a batting guy that can bowl a bit of spin, they've got their eye on Ravindra. There's a guy called Mitchell Santner that's quite good at international cricket. They've had Michael Rippon kind of floating around. He's got a reasonable Plunket Shield record if they wanted to roll the dice and do something a little bit wacky. But I don't think they will. And then the other thing is that potentially, and I don't know this, but Matt Henry, I felt sorry for him, man. When he went down, I thought, oh, shit, he's stuffed for a long time. But he came back and bowled a sensational and very long spell. But I do wonder how his back is. So in which case, we're back to a Duffy, Kugelheim, Tickner, or maybe a Doug Bracewell situation.
Yeah.
Just for the record, I'm pretty sure Lovely Trenty will be available. IPL doesn't start till the 1st of April. So a few things to think about at least.
Yeah.
There's still a balance issue too, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. But waiting. What I would like to see, Dylan, and it's very easy to do this as a non-selector and in a completely pointless voice in the background. I'd like to see a bolter for this series. Where's the bolter?
To what purpose, though? I mean, we all love a bolter.
Yes, because I feel like Kugelheim and Tickner.
You'd like to see Lister, wouldn't you?
I would.
Yes.
I would.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind it.
It's those guys gave everything, and it's not to denigrate them. I just feel that is too conservative, that they need to look outside the box and take a risk or two.
Well, if it's very hard when you're presented with this incredible feast of cricket over the last 5 days, but if you look dispassionately at it, it's another series we haven't won. And that's 6 series New Zealand hasn't won in this WTC cycle. That team was all over 30. So you've got to assume that team is not going to get a lot better than it is now.
No.
So they do need to start thinking about the next generation or the next wave of players. Paul Rachin, Ravindra, who obviously had a tough time coming into Test cricket. But I look at Michael Bracewell and I think, well, would Rachin be doing anything that Bracewell's not doing at the moment? Sure, he might struggle a bit, but he also might not give his wicket away quite so liberally. So I think that's the guy you've got to look at if you're going to play that bits and pieces spinner slash batter. There's not much young blood in the way of batting. Joe Carter, they like it, ND, but he's not particularly young. Obviously, Will Young's still on that fringe. Should it be Young? Should it be Nichols? I mean, they're both plus 30. There's a kid at CD that they like the look of, but he can't even break into the CD team. They go Curtis Heafy.
Right, yes.
So there's not a lot of bolters for batters. But I agree. Tickner, Duffy, Kugelheim, all good, solid, first-class tries.
Well, you mentioned a word there, and I think it's a good word, stopgap.
Yes.
And I think that's what they are.
Yeah.
And my concern... Actually, I don't have an issue with Bracewell. I think I'm happy for him to be in the side. I think he brings a lot, and I think his bowling is improving. I think he's...
There was an acid test for him, though, on the last day of a test match, and he was a non-factor.
Yes, fair point. But my concern is not so much with the batting. And yes, Henry Nichols is under pressure, as is Will Young. But we've got to give Will Young some time here. You can't let him have that one test match and go, all right, we'll see you later. My concern is not so much with the batting. My concern is with the bowling, Paul Ford.
Yeah, well, if we lose Matt Henry, I mean, he's topped the averages for that series against England. And then it's actually Tickner and then it's Wagner, and then it's Kugelheim, and then it's Bracewell, and then it's Southey. So it's interesting how the statistics can foil you, as you were saying, Dylan, Wagger's the most wickets in the series out of all the bowlers. So, look, I think we're just talking crap, really, because we know that the selectors have got their little pot of players. I think the only one really knocking on the door is probably Bracewell, Doug Bracewell. I think, it could be worth a crack. But again, it's your point, Jace. We've given
Henry Shipley,
Duffy and Kugelheim and Tickner a sniff, and the selectors are prepared to give guys multiple chances. So, I wouldn't be surprised in terms of bolters. He's not going to get picked for this series, but there's a young guy for Wellington, Azza Abbas's son, Muhammad Abbas.
Yes.
He's only about 19, I think. He is going to be a gun, but I don't think we're picking him for a test match in 8 days.
He scored so many runs at the under-19 nationals, but again, he's only just started playing against men, so it's probably a little bit early.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't see there being... But actually, if we're talking bowlers and who do we bring in, my personal preference absolutely would be Bracewell over Kugelheim or Tickner.
Yep.
And, I'm not putting the boot into those guys because they gave everything and they, they did okay. But I just don't feel like it's a bowling attack with those two and that the international cricket players are going to go, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to face those guys. But anyway, looking forward to that series, fellas.
That's pretty soon too.
Yeah,
isn't
not
it?
this weekend, the following week.
Yeah. March 9, I think.
March 9 it is.
That's right. And Sri Lanka are here. They're here for 6 weeks. They're already in Christchurch. They're going to get a good warm-up in. They're here for 10 days, and they've got a warm-up game against the New Zealand 11 at Hagley starting on Saturday. It's their first test series in 8 months, so we're going to give them a goddamn hiding in the test matches.
Great stuff. Now, listen, moving on. Australia win the Women's World Cup, Cricket World Cup again.
Pretty comfortable. Beth Mooney, player. Move on.
No surprises, really, is there?
No, well, they were lucky they got South Africa in the final and not England.
Yeah, well, England,
They
had a bit of a shitter in that semi-final, really, didn't they? They blew it.
They certainly did.
But no surprises, Paul Ford.
No, I mean, this Australian women's team's been acclaimed as, one of the most dominant teams in the history of sport anywhere in the world. I mean, it is just a procession. In the last 23 years, they've won 113 out of 134 games at World Cups. So they win 84% of their games at World Cups. They are phenomenal. And they had 3 batters and 3 bowlers in the top 10 run scorers and wicket takers in that tournament. That they're extraordinary.
Moving on to Australia versus India.
Tonight. Is it tonight?
Yes, I think it is. Mitchell Johnson putting the boot in. From the outside, he says, it doesn't look as if they care enough. Losing isn't the issue. It's the way they've folded that has been the most disappointing part. The tour has descended into a bit of a debacle with injuries, selection puzzlers, and players coming home left, right and centre. None of it has made much sense, says he, Dylan Cleaver.
Yeah, I don't mind the last bit because it has been a debacle and we've laughed at it. Ashton Agar and players coming hither and to, but the bit they don't care enough, that's kind of bollocks, really. Every international cricketer cares. Possibly Kevin Peterson didn't in that last tour to Australia where he acted like a pork chop from the moment he landed, but I would say that is the gross exception to the rule. Cricketers care.
Yeah, and I think that's a cheap shot, really, isn't it? To say, because I agree with you. I don't think, Paul Ford, that cricketers go out there to fail, and I don't think they go out there and go, you know what? I don't give a shit today. I'm just going to bat terribly or bowl terribly. I don't think that's what people think, and it's just an ex-player venting his frustration, if you will.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, there's only 50 billion people watching, so I'm going to not care. I mean, that makes no sense. I mean, I think this is just probably another symptom of the factionalised setup of Australian cricket. You're either in the Langer camp or you're not, and Mitchell Johnson's from Western Australia. He's writing in the West Australian paper. I mean, he's going to put the boot in, no question. It's going to be interesting. Your mate Cam's going to be back in. Matt Renshaw's going to be gone, Jace. Mitchell Stark's going to be in because, of course, Pat Cummins has got that horrible family issue with his mum who's really, really sick. and Australia looks set to play 3 spinners again. So, it's going to be interesting. And I know we'll wish Australia all the greatest of success for the Indoor Inferno, which, as you say, does start at Wednesday tonight at 5 o'clock, Dylan. Steve Smith will be the standard skipper. So won't that be terrific?
Good stuff. He deserves it.
Far out. Makes me sick in my mouth a little bit. Now, going on to domestic cricket, farcical happenings at Auckland Cricket who face the wrath of their counterparts at the Basin meeting. Do tell, Dylan.
Yeah, well, they've just had an absolute shock of the season. 8 games scheduled for Colomaidan Park, which, at the best will of the world, is a club ground.
Yes.
And not even a particularly nice club ground at that.
No, it's average.
The latest game called off was a Halliburton-Johnson Shield game, which is not going to cause, earthquakes in the New Zealand sports news media or anything like that, but that was I believe it was the last game for a couple of Auckland stalwarts, including Holly Huddleston. Perfectly fine day, don't get to play because someone made an error. Ground like a bog. Yeah. And evidently, patience is worn so thin with Auckland's intransigence around their ground situation now and their unwillingness to look beyond the comfort of Eden Park, where they're the beneficiaries of the Eden Park Trust. A lot of frustration, I believe, was aired towards Auckland. I think all the CEOs were meeting at the Basin Reserve this week. Just basically get your shit together.
Yeah.
Note.
Colin Maiden.
Conveniently time meeting, I note.
Yes.
Did quite a bit of umpiring there. And you're right, it's not a great ground. Windy, Dylan. Windy.
Hard to get to.
Yeah, it's one of those grounds I used to hate because it was like, there's nothing like the wind blowing in your face all day. The Plunket Shield, Ratchin gets a ton for Wellington. Canterbury beaten ND. Wellington draw with Otago. The points at this moment, Canterbury on top with 71, Wellington 53, Central Districts 46, Northern Districts 39, Otago 37, and Auckland a paltry 32, fellas.
Yeah, Auckland have only played 4 games, I guess, where most of the others have
played 5.
5, but it's going to take some doing to knock Canterbury off their perch. So come on, Wellington, come on, CD.
Well, that guy, Mohamed Abbas, that I talked about, he was on debut. He's got 79 and 33, so not a bad start against the big boys. Ratchin, that ton. Glenn Phillips got got 60, I think, and 40 odd. So, knocking on the door. There's a young guy actually at Canterbury called Reese Murray, 68 and 78 not out on debut. Another guy to keep an eye on. New Zealand under-19s came out of St Andrews College in 2019 or 2018, something like that. Cool. Santner played, got a few runs, batting at number 5.
Foxcroft.
Sodhi got a few runs, not too many wickets. And Foxcroft, I looked at, Dylan, you and I were talking about him, average of 34 in first-class cricket, average of 44 in T20 cricket.
Yeah, bizarre, eh? That was his first, I believe that was his first-class century. And he's a gun player, so perhaps it goes to show that the young player leans more towards the white ball.
Aye. Golden Box, Cole McConchy, 501. Barrett Popley, 428. Ravindra, 423. Silver Sweatband, Duffy, 27. Henry, 23. Doug Bracewell, 20. And, getting back to Doug Bracewell very quickly, I'd be okay with Henry, Southey, Bracewell, Wagner in my bowling attack. I'd be okay with that, boys. So make it happen, would you?
Yep.
Are we happy with that bowling attack? And braces, obviously. I mean, Michael, the beast. That'd be good.
It's not young, though.
Well, don't get carried away supporting me in that.
No. I thought Dylan was going to say something.
You've just begged for a bolter.
I
and
did.
Now you've gone for like a 34-year-old.
Well, you guys were so unenthusiastic. I went, okay, well, I won't have a bolter then.
No, I would have had Bracewell in ahead of Tickter or Kugelin.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
If Matt Henry's vertebrae are not okay, we're going to need to ring up your mate Benjamin Lister, Jace. So I think you should just make sure he stays fresh.
Yes.
I
speak to him every day, mate. Every day.
67 wickets in 28 first-class games at 26. So he's in contention.
Yeah, nice. But right now it's time for Paul Ford's News or Ruse.
Dylan Cleaver is the current holder of the Oi Hoi Challenge Trophy thanks to the Peter Jackson Ruse last week. Item number 1, Spain has caused a cricketing stir by bowling out the Isle of Man for 10 runs, the lowest score recorded in a T20 men's
That sounds like me in the under-8s, and 6 of them were byes.
The Spaniards clinched a 5-0 bilateral series win over the Manx men, with their 10-wicket victory clinched off just 2 legitimate balls at the La Manga Club on Sunday. This was the fastest T20 international victory of all time, achieved with 118 balls remaining. Spain wasted no time securing victory, with opener and wicketkeeper Awais Ahmed smashing 6s off the first 2 balls, one of which was a no ball. What the hell? Cricket Hispana saluted the feat on social media as the fastest T20 win ever. The Isle of Man side were playing out of season, and their head coach Greg Wright said before the series that his side had been training all year round for 2 years now, and the players were regularly hitting balls indoors and have been looking really good. So, goodness me. I'm bringing that back to haunt him. Yeah, he won't be happy to be hearing that on News or Ruse. Number 2, in Australian domestic women's cricket, Tasmania has pulled off the most remarkable comeback victory to claim a second consecutive national one-day title, somehow taking 5 final over wickets and bowling a shell-shocked South Australia out in an unforgettable 1-run win. Tasmania posted 264, then it rained, the target got reduced to 243, and then it was 5 for 239 going into the last over. So the Scorpions needed 4 runs to win off 6 balls, and the over went like this: wicket caught, 1 run, wicket stumped, wicket, run out, non-strikers end, wicket LBW, wicket, run out. Absolute scenes. It's a great little video if you track that one down. And number 3, Stuff reported that 3 boomer blokes called Blod, Sprout and PC had it all planned: flights, accommodation, the waddle down to the Basin Reserve to see 5 days of the Black Caps playing England, in a tradition going back 25 years, but they had no tickets. So Sprout, real name Brian Young, took out a notice in the Dominion Post under the heading 4 boomers need help, asking if anyone had tickets they didn't need. Sprout said the group still flew into Wellington for the test. If we have to, we'll watch it from the pub, he said. They've been mates growing up in Balclutha, and ever since they were aged about 30, they realised they weren't seeing each other enough, so they planned group trips to cricket tests, and they've been doing it every year ever since. And I have it on very good authority that they were sweet as they got sorted and they were at the match. So lovely story out of Balclutha for you boys.
Great stuff, Paul.
I'm confused about how there were 3 boomers and then suddenly there were 4 in the advert. And also Brian Young seems very suspicious, doesn't it? It sounds like a former New Zealand opener and slip fielder. But I am still going to go with the second story because it was 4 wickets, not 5.
Genuinely, that's what I was going to go with as well, that it wasn't 5 wickets in the final over. So
but Jace, then you heard what Dylan said in the lead-in before he picked the
I think Brian Young's not right. I'm going with that.
Yeah, that's bang on. Well, congratulations, Jason Hoyte.
Oh, Lord. Goodness me. I must be steaming ahead now, surely.
It's a challenge trophy now. It's not on points.
Hey, right now it's time for Dylan Cleaver's Obscure Players of the 90s.
Obscure Players of the 90s.
Yeah, and I had a nomination actually from Paul Ford as we were sitting together at the Basin, probably with a hazy pale ale in our hands, and he pointed me to Rhys Morgan, but unfortunately his career just sat outside the time zone. I'm going to have to do
2000s.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do Obscure Players of the noughties at some point. So we're in Auckland, and I've gone for Simon Peterson. Simon Peterson actually played quite a few matches. He played 26 first-class matches, averaged 22.95 at a strike rate of 35, so probably not something you'd leave work to make sure you got down to the ground to watch bat anyway, put it that way. 5 50s, and he just rolled the arm over about 5 wickets in his career at an average of 34. He might have been an obscure cricketer, but he's actually one of the lowest profile, high profile sports administrators in the country. He has been CEO of Sport Auckland, then he was CEO of Rowing New Zealand during their glory years, and there's obviously a firefighting element to his administration because he's now been signed up to be the CEO of the Troubled Cycling New Zealand from 2023 onwards. So that's Simon Peterson, my obscure cricketer of the 90s.
Great stuff, mate. Obviously pretty good at his job if they're looking to sign him up for the cycling.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Hey, but right now it's on the boundary. Jace's Poetry Corner. Oh.
On the Boundary with Jason Hoyte.
Lovely. I was actually saying to Dylan as I came in, I was scouring through victory poems today, trying to find victory poems, but I couldn't find one and that I liked. And then he went, what about this one? And I thought, perfect for the boys after their magnificent victory. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in the green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late, they grieve it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Oh, Dylan there, eh?
Beautiful. Beautiful bit of Dylan Thomas.
Great stuff. Now, our correspondence, fellas. Pouring in, is it Paul Ford?
It certainly has been. But we've got one here on the WhatsApp group. Are we going to rip into that one? Or do you just want to know how to get in touch?
I think get in touch, yeah.
Yeah, sweet. Sorry if we didn't get to your message this week. We got a bit carried away, but flick us an email to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs of the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade on Instagram or Facebook, and we will get to your message eventually.
Great stuff. Just on scoreboards, how many beersies do you reckon you boys racked up when you were down there?
5.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Over 2 days?
No, that was over a session, wasn't it?
Five a session.
5 per session.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that makes more sense. Hey, listen, well, let's bask in this great victory and acknowledge the Black Caps today because it was an outstanding victory. Very much looking forward to the Test series against Sri Lanka and getting into a bit more Test cricket. We certainly appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast. What's going on in the bounce, Dylan?
The bounce is going, well, the bounce got carried away by the cricket as well. It was pretty much all cricket for the last week, but dylancleaver.substack.com or just Google Dylan Cleaver the Bounce. Sign up. It's free. Join the thousands.
Thousands. Great stuff.
There were people accosting you and, you know, BYC podcast people that love the bounce at the Basin. It was a real mecca for cricket nerds of New Zealand the past week.
I feel like the Basin
it's awesome.
the Basin is the bounce's spiritual home.
Yes. Well, it is one of the great cricket grounds, isn't it, fellas? Let's be honest. And topped off beautifully by a great victory. Don't forget to subscribe and rate us 5 stars, please. Until next week, you take care out there, and we'll be back later on.